Welcome to the Gold Newsletter Podcast, your bank of knowledge of investment, economics, and geopolitics. Go to goldnewsletter.com for our publications and archives.
This is the Gold Newsletter Podcast. Fergus Hodgson, your host, with Brian London, my co-host in New Orleans. And we have the lovely Erika Sweeney on today. She is a geologist. She has 4 years experience working in North America with junior explorers, and she studied her engineering degree or geological engineering degree at the 𝗂𝗵𝗂𝗶𝗆 Institute in France. And we thought this would be a lovely opportunity to get more of an insider's view of the mining sector rather than the macro perspective, which we normally go for. So Erika, welcome.
Hi, Fergus. Hi, Brian. Thank you very much for hosting me on this podcast. And this is really a pleasure for me to get back in touch with you and be here today.
Yeah, and I first met Erika at the New Orleans Investment Conference. And I just always find it interesting, the different personalities involved. And she's got an international story. What attracted you to the field to begin with? Why did you come to, you're still in the United States, right?
Yeah, so, I'm French, but actually from Réunion Island, which is a little tropical volcanic island off the coast of Madagascar.
Yes.
And I think it's just, geology was always a passion for me. Started studying geology, and I end up, it's kind of this weird mix of liking the industry, business, and to have this relation between the scientific part of it, the technical part of it, and the business part of it. I thought the mining was very challenging, interesting, and actually that's the reason why I got into it. And the more I learn about it, and the more I like it.
That's fascinating. So where are you located right now, Erika?
I'm actually based in New Mexico, in Santa Fe.
Wow. So from an island off the coast of Madagascar to New Mexico.
Right.
Mining engineering. Wow, you really are following your passion wherever it may lead, huh?
Exactly. There's no borders, just
geology knows no borders. Correct.
Yeah.
It's great.
And so what has taken you by surprise in the field from, let's say, the outsider looking into now doing your work and exploring? What has been different from what you anticipated?
Yes, it's totally different techniques. And I have to say, it can be either on the cultural side or even the technical side. It's totally different. But you just get used to it, right? You just learn. And I think that's
different from what you learn in classes back at school, back at the university.
Yes, it's different, and especially because the everything you use as of a technique from Europe to North America, it varies, right? Even if you go to Russia, even if you go to South in America, you have those different techniques because of what you have to deal with, right? The different companies and everything else. So I think it's very interesting to see the different methods, and it's actually a strength to me and for anybody that does it, right? And it's actually pretty hard to get into North America and find a job when you come from Europe because obviously you got to deal with the visa and everything else, right? So it's something to consider.
So the techniques actually vary depending on the country you're operating in, or even the culture, as opposed to just, I would think the techniques would vary according to the geology and the target you're exploring for and the like. But it really varies even culturally on how geologists in different areas of the world approach projects.
Yes, so I agree with you. There's this aspect of, depending on the deposit, of the style, of your rocks or anything, yes, it does vary a lot. But it also varies in the style of thinking and applying the techniques from country to country. It does.
And the
For
goals,
sure.
I think, would vary because in some other areas of the world, they're not driven as much as I would think, not necessarily North America based for the projects, but if the company is based in North America or Australia, they're trying, a big goal is to appease investors and get information out to investors and to present projects in a light that's favorable for the company. So if you run into that a bit, I mean, in the US and working for for North American based companies that are financed primarily in the Canadian markets, there's a big reporting requirement, for a publicly listed company on an exchange, and also it serves the goals of the company to try and raise money. Do you find that companies kind of always are driving toward that?
Yes, yes, actually, this is very true. And this is a fact that a lot of companies, they're driving toward that. And the fact that in Canada, I mean, North America is pretty much based on, the Canadian way to do it. And especially, I mean, if you go down to Mexico, for example, you're not going to find, especially all the companies listed on Toronto Stock Exchange. In that case, they won't especially have that link to the 43-101 that you need to have for resource, etc. So there's variation there, but it does look like globally, people tend to gravitate toward the Canadian idea, really to avoid and to help investors better understand where we're going, what are the different, what are the liabilities that comes into it, and what are really the techniques used, and does it make sense? Do we have something that you will not have any corruption linked to it as well? Because this could be very important, right? And as you see, for example, in Africa or in some South American countries, you got to be careful with those things. And that's unfortunate. So I think people tend to gravitate a lot toward the Canadian standards, exactly, because it helps a lot investors as well to make a
that's
decision
one of
to
the
move
things.
forward.
Looking at the long history of mining speculation, it really has its roots and almost has always been in the Canadian markets, the Canadian stock exchanges. And I tell people that if a company is listed, say in the US over-the-counter market, a mining exploration company or development company, and it's not listed in Canada, that's probably because it's trying to avoid the stricter regulatory regime in Canada. In the old days, the Canadian exchanges were the Wild West, but they cleaned up their acts so much, and they were just perfectly suited to do so because they had seen every manner of scam that could possibly be perpetrated over the decades. So they were able to regulate against that. Whereas in the US, they really are so far behind the Canadian. I mean, the Canadian, it's a speculative area anyway of investing, but the Canadian regulatory authorities have really tightened it up so much. It's the most secure place to speculate on mineral exploration.
Yes, I totally agree with that. And I'm myself an investor. And when I do look at companies to invest in, I definitely look at the Canadian standards. That's for sure.
Being behind the scenes as you are, and when you're looking for a company to invest in, what are you looking at from a technical end as some potential pitfalls that an investor coming into the sector really wouldn't be aware of necessarily without that geological background?
Well, I think one primary parameter that I look at is the management, the people. Who's leading the company? What's their background? Have they had any success before? And if not, which is totally fine, not everybody, had success because they just started in the business, but it's really how are they going to drive the company and grow the company. So for me, that's kind of the primary point when I invest somewhere. Then it comes to the technical background.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes to the property. So depending on the business model, obviously, if you're project generator or if you're explorer or producing, it totally depends. But at the end, it comes to what kind of project they have, and is it worth a discovery? So, because it's going to have a big impact in my investment, right? So depending short-term, long-term, all of that comes into account. And I think it's, but the primary thing stays the people that actually work in the company. It could be on the technical side or the corporate side. Both matters a lot.
Yeah, that's a common theme that a number of people have said for decades, and I completely agree with. You know, a good management team, the people who have done it before, they not only are more likely to do it again, they actually command a premium. And you brought up a good point. It's okay if somebody doesn't have that experience. Even the people who've had a few big successes, at some point they were unproven and they had to have that first success. And,
right.
and you know, from one of the investment angles in this market, the way that kind of translates to the real world is that an unproven management team may have a geological idea, a project that they're trying to finance, and that they may be forced to finance that project at 5 cents or 10 cents a share, you know, very low valuations. Whereas a management group that's come off one or two big successes can come out and finance that at 50 cents a share or something like that. That happens all the time in that they're able to get those premiums in the market. Conversely, if you're able to find a team that has a good project and doesn't have that reputation yet in the industry, you can get into those kinds of opportunities cheaper, but then you have to have a good feeling about the project itself.
Yes.
And that's really a gap that investors, you know, find it very difficult to bridge if they don't have that kind of technical expertise that you might have.
No, exactly. And I totally agree with you on that. I strongly think that when you invest in the mining industry, you need a little bit of background. It's not just numbers. You got to understand what's going on in the back of that. So personally, I'm extremely happy that I actually went through this whole process of getting my master's in geology and actually get experience in the industry, in producing mine and on exploration side as well with junior companies. Because as of right now, it just gives me a really good idea who I'm dealing with, what kind of deposit I'm dealing with, what kind of discoveries you're going toward. Because depending on the style of deposit, you're not going to have the same style of impact when it comes to the discovery. So talking about grades, talking about thickness, all of that is necessary for a mine, right? Because at the end, what everybody wants is a project to become a mine. So it's very interesting to see really this evolution and having short-term and long-term investment and really targeting a specific return for me, depending on the project and the company.
Yeah, because you're making a transition right now from the geological or the field end of exploration game into more of corporate development. And how are you finding that transition? I mean, are you finding that projects as a geologist may have been intriguing to you, that when you get into the corporate end of it and you have to look at what that project is worth, or you have to find a joint venture partner, is it sometimes discouraging that something that you see as a geologist is very interesting, but it's hard to make that, to translate that to either investors or other potential joint venture partners and the like?
So, yes. Yes, because as a geologist, you don't especially have that background. when it comes to finance. It's a different language, if I can call it this way. So it's something that you got to learn. And that's the reason why having either an MBA, going toward a CFA, learning a different kind of different knowledge to really mix with that technical background is really ideal. So, but it's hard to make a transition. It's hard because people don't see you as corporate development investors or anything else like this, right? They see you as a geologist. So you gotta kind of force a little bit and really have the right people on your side. And I think it's a matter of network, a matter of people that are with you that's gonna make you grow in the industry. So, and I think that's extremely important. So yes, it's really hard to make the transition, but it's happening, and I'm really happy and currently working for Riverside Resources. And this is a company for which, just like you said, we're doing project generations. And by doing that, it's exactly understanding as we're going to spend a certain amount of money to acquire a project. So what's going to be the return on that? So return for us as of the company, but it's also, we're a public company. It's a return for our shareholder. So what it's going to take to actually raise our share price. So it's not just acquiring a project, it's a whole strategy that's going to have an impact on our share price and our valuation. So that's where we're at today. And I'm really excited about the future, and especially in this bull market right now. That is, it's just a lot of adrenaline, right? Every day you wake up, every day something happens, and there's so much to take advantage of right now.
And what is your advice then for the people who come from the financial world, and that's their language, and are trying to understand this geological language, right? So what are the quick and dirty tips for crossing that divide?
I think for somebody that has no background in geology, you gotta find a partner. You gotta find somebody that's gonna help you, that you're gonna trust, because not every geologist is gonna think economic. Thinking economic, because you can be a really good geologist, see what's out there, which is awesome. It doesn't mean it's economic, right? And that's what makes a big difference, I believe. And so, yeah, coming from the financial side, for me, it's a matter of having somebody that you trust and has a good vision on what's economic geology.
The Gold Newsletter podcast is proudly sponsored by the Discovery Group of Exploration and Development Companies. To learn more about our exceptional track record and exciting future, visit discoverygroup.ca.
Hi, I'm Brian London, and I'm here with this week's CEO interview, in which we interview one of the CEOs or executives with our from the Discovery Group, which is the sponsor of the Gold Newsletter podcast. And this week, we're very happy to have Darren Klinck with Bluestone Resources, which has been a long-time recommendation in Gold Newsletter. Made a good bit of money for our readers. And Bluestone's symbol is BSR on the Venture Index. And what we'd like to talk about today, Darren, is how Bluestone, having come as far as it has and having made some money for our good returns for our Gold Newsletter subscribers, how it's really just the beginning, because one of the key aspects we see here is Bluestone is entering that sweet spot of pre-production phase, where you've done and are doing most of the hard development work, but you have that re-rating coming up to you as you're about to start pouring gold. Can you kind of explain where you are in that process?
Yeah, you bet, Brian. Great to be back again and to catch up with you. No doubt there's been a fair bit that's happened over the last number of months since we last caught up. Yeah, no, that's correct. I mean, I have to say we can't take all the credit because at the end of the day, we acquired this asset in 2017 from Goldcorp, and probably, along with it, had a 13 or 14-year head start. We got the luxury of more than $200 million of investment previously, from the exploration through studies through actual underground infrastructure at Cerro Blanco. And really, since we picked it up in 2017, we were able to do some technical work on the geology, update the resource, put a feasibility study in place, and then kick off really the project finance process last year, which is now just coming towards the finishing touches on it. Earlier this year, we kicked off the engineering phase, so we went into kind of an optimization and trade-off phase. We got involved with 𝗀𝗂𝗯𝗀𝗰𝗍𝗀. 𝗀𝗂𝗯𝗀𝗀𝗀 has just come off the execution of the 𝗂𝗸𝗏 𝗀𝗏 project in Ecuador with Lundin Gold. And the Lundin family, of course, is our largest shareholder, and Jack Lundin joined us earlier this year as CEO. So we're right now, in the middle of that engineering phase, and we expecting to start placing long lead items later this year, an underground mining contract tender process, which is also expected to come to a completion towards the end of the year. And then we're into early works, getting the plant site ready to go for construction in 2021, and on track. Our expectations is that we should be commissioning Cerro Blanco the middle part of 2022 into the third quarter, which isn't that far away.
And I'd like to get into that and what we're talking about, the sweet spot of pre-development and what that means for investors in just a moment. But to bring people up into context and up to speed on this project, you have very high grade resource of about 1.4 million, I believe, ounces at very high average grades. You're doing drilling now to bring a lot of upgrading that resource, which in turn adds value and actually adds to the economics in this particular deposit. You're releasing news to the public. You're still drillings. Just had news out on some more exceptional drill intercepts. But there are two other factors at play here, in that as the gold price spiked this summer, not only the producers, but also the developers like yourself weren't really re-rated along with those higher metals prices. So you have what was already an extraordinarily profitable project, very conservatively estimated with economics at about 𝗀𝗏𝗁𝗍𝒀 gold, I believe. And now at closer to 2,000 gold, you're talking about paybacks approaching just a year for the mine and extending mine life at some point with revised economics. So there's a lot more going behind the scene. But let's talk about that pre-production phase now, that sweet spot where re-rating naturally comes as a company gets closer to production, which is very close, as you say, for yourself.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And I think if we focus on, the fact that every business, including in our space, even as, you go from explorer through to developer, I mean, our objective is to get to being a cash producing entity, right? And for many years in the mining space, as you explore, make a discovery, explore, and advance through, you're cash consuming. But it is the sweet spot, Brian. And of course, along the ways, most projects actually fall by the wayside because, technically or economically, they don't make sense. Cerro Blanco is one that stands out. It's one of the highest grade undeveloped gold projects in the world today. It's got its mining permit. We've got 3.5 kilometers of underground development in place right now, and obviously a significant head start. Maybe just looking at some comparisons out there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, let's take a look at that,
Brian.
Because some companies just a bit further down the road than you are selling for considerable multiples of your market cap right now.
Yeah, you can probably count on one set of fingers, perhaps, or a couple set of hands anyways, in terms of the number of gold developers that are in that sweet spot right now. Part and parcel, I think, the paucity of exploration over the last sort of 7-8 years through the downturn, but also the fact that Mother Nature's not making any more deposits, right? So, from that perspective, to see them advance through the various different stages and get to a point where then you can actually raise the finance and execute on the development to bring them into construction, there's not that many. But here's a handful of single asset companies. You look at K92 has been a great success, obviously a single asset producer, and producing comparable. All 5 of those companies are expected to or currently are producing comparable amounts of gold on a per annum basis, and the cash flows, utilizing their numbers, and albeit these are at a $1,250 or $1,275 gold price to standardize them, the cash flows are in that same sort of ballpark. But probably the thing to focus on here, I think, is when you look at the market cap. We're perhaps a little bit behind. Pure Gold's obviously in construction's done a great job. That stock's moved up, materially over the last 6 months with the move up in the gold price, but also into that construction phase. 𝗬𝗏, another project, they're in Mexico, been able to demonstrate getting the project finance in place, and then getting going with the early works and right in the midst of engineering. And that stock's performed very well here over the last 3 to 4 months as well. And so we really see that as we bring the project finance in, and we're expecting to take that through to credit approval by the end of the year, and then get going on early works at site. And then, as I said, as we get into the second quarter, we should be in the construction phase, delivering this project the middle part of 2022. There's a huge opportunity here in terms of a re-rating for us on what's a very high quality project, and it's going to generate great cash flows at $1,250 gold, let alone at $1,900.
Yeah, and I think that's the key. If you're looking for, we invest in this sector and we look for companies that have the potential to multiply our money. And typically we have to go really far down the food chain into exploration stocks to get that kind of upside potential. But what we're looking at here is a company with just outstanding economics, a project with outstanding economics that will get built, is getting built. And it's really just a function of time before that gap is closed, the closer you get to the production, and offers that kind of potential. If you just get to the average of your peer group, you're talking 3 times. And again, that doesn't factor in the much higher gold price environment we're in now and the much higher gold price environment that we anticipate. Darren, thank you so much for being with us and giving us an update on Bluestone, a very exciting company. One of the best bets in our portfolio of gold newsletter recommended companies, and in a company I consistently recommend for the very factors that we just went over. Thanks again, Darren.
Thank you, Brian. Great to be here.
That's something I stress all the time, because as you can imagine, in this market, when it's gold prices, silver prices, metals prices are rising, there's a lot of money in the sector now. We're getting a lot of people coming to Gold Newsletter who are interested in the sector, want to know how to invest, and they're completely new, and they don't know, especially, and I mean, it's hard enough to figure out how to invest in gold and silver, but when you get into the mining stocks, there's so much to learn and so much to know. And I tell them that they have to take it slowly. They have to invest in their education, go to conferences, subscribe to the best newsletters, really dedicate time, effort, and money if they really want to take advantage of it. Because it is an inefficient market. If you know enough to where you can talk to the management teams, you can figure out what company has a great shot at what kind of deposit. There are inefficiencies in this market. It's not like investing on Wall Street. And you can take advantage of that with a little knowledge. But if you're not going to invest that kind of effort into learning about it, you're really setting yourself up to be a victim, and should just invest in the indices. And that's what you really, I mean, Fergus, you met Erika at the New Orleans Investment Conference. And that's an example of the kinds of areas where people can go and meet somebody, walk up to a booth. Of course, these days it's only virtual, but in the good old days, pre-pandemic, you go up and you find management team and you look them in the eyes and you ask them questions, and you see what their reactions are and ask them what can go wrong. The next year, you can go up to that same company and say, well, this is what you said last year. How have things gone? And in the interim, you can track what goes on with the company. But yeah, it's a lot to learn for a novice investor.
Yes, no, definitely. And it's really being patient as well. Keeping an eye on how things are going, because the mining industry, it's slow. It's not something, you're not going to build a mine in 5 years, right? It's going to take you 10, 20 years. And during those 10 and 20 years, you're going to have potentially multiple discoveries. You're going to go through different projects. So it's something that I think it's to take into consideration, really being patient and getting to learn the people and the project. It's extremely important.
So I guess you talked about how long it takes in mining. You probably had some frustration at now moving into the corporate end of the business, and how investors always want drill results and when are you drilling, when are you drilling, and not really understanding the depth and breadth of work that has to be done before that. I mean, are you experiencing some frustrations in explaining that to people and how much has to be done for the drills to actually start turning?
So yes and no. So yes, because like you say, investors are, they need results right away. And when they talk about results, they talk about numbers. So for them, you can't give them a nice geological explanation because it doesn't mean anything to them. As long as there's numbers, there's result, it works out. But to get to that point, it's a lot of money invested. It's a lot of time. And like you said, if you want to set up a drill program, unless you have everything ready to go, it's going to take you months until you can actually put a hole in the ground. And people don't really see that. So you got to be extremely careful when you talk to somebody, really explaining them kind of what could be the timing. And for me, it's very conditional because you never know what can come in the way, right? Because just like you say, people are not in the field, they don't understand how it works, especially. So we do our best to provide the numbers on time. It doesn't mean that those numbers are going to be what they expect on the timeline that they expected for, the reason that we mentioned. On the other hand is I totally understand them because I'm an investor myself, and when I invest somewhere, I do not want to follow just speculation. I want proof. And proof comes from assaying. So it's not just assaying on surface, it's also assaying underground. So with drill holes, right? So I do understand the kind of both sides, and it's very tricky. But if you work with the right company and the right people, then you can make it happen. You can make it happen for investors and for geologists as well. But you gotta have somebody that really understands both sides of it.
What is your perspective on just the fact that finding good prospects is getting harder and harder with time, that the grades are lower than they were, let's say, 50 years ago?
Well, so I don't especially think that's true.
Okay.
I just think that we're in this time where a lot of people go back to brownfield exploration because especially the past years, people didn't have much money. So to raise money, they needed to prove that there was something in the ground already. So you can't do greenfield with very few information and go out there and try to raise money, right? So, and that it comes back to the point that we just made of we need numbers to be able to satisfy investors. So it's really hard to satisfy investors with very few data. So people tend to go back to brownfield and revisit those older, already explored areas type of thing, right? Which is great because we have new technologies and there's so much to get out of it, right? What was done in the past in the 80s, we have so much potential today to actually prove geophysics or any other methods to actually find more, which is fine. And I think that's why we tend to find lower grades, like you mentioned. It's because we revisit what was already taken in the past. So I strongly believe there is a lot more to come, especially if you look at Canada. I mean, it's a huge country. there's so much to look at. Everybody's been focused on Red Lake, 𝗵𝗄, for example, when it comes to Ontario, which are amazing grade. There's so much to find out there. But I strongly believe that there's a lot more projects that are more greenfield, not especially with a lot of focus that they had in the past, which is totally fine. But there's just so much ground to be explored. There's still a lot of projects out there that are fully valuable. And I think it's just a matter of the market that needs to switch a little bit toward the greenfield. So we need to have, and I'm hoping that this bull market is going to help that. We're going to switch our investment toward greenfield versus brownfield. So we could have a lot more discoveries, but discoveries that are going to have an impact, not just lower grades, but something that's going to be brand new, fresh, with high grade that has not been taken out of the ground yet. That's my idea,
Erika, because that does run contrary to a lot of the more popular or the consensus beliefs that we're running out of discoveries. And in your view, that it's a function of just the exploration dollars being really not there to do greenfield discoveries for some time is fascinating. And you can even look ahead and see how the cycle is going to develop, because let's say we have a bull market here for 5, 7, 8 years. Hopefully it lasts that long. We have a lot of money generated. People then put a lot of that into greenfields exploration, and then they start to make those discoveries. Then the cycle goes down again. And then the next cycle, or in the bottom, when there's little money, people are going to go back and find these projects that were at some point dropped. And then the discoveries come in, and then the cycle starts again. And that's really, it's a lot of what happened over the last few years. Is we found a good bit, as this market started to wake up a bit, we found the rediscoveries making news, and people coming in and saying, had they, like Great Bear, for example, found out that, or realized that nobody was able to put their discovery or the project together, the geology together, because somebody had misplaced the drill holes on the map, so they didn't seem to hang together. Going into a camp where there's been previous work is easiest and cheapest sometimes. We can look forward to then a lot of money hopefully being deployed and finding some new big discoveries. And if I'm in this business long enough, I'll have to remember those for the down cycle after this bull market.
No, for sure. And I think it's a matter of, I think we're at this point where we need to screen larger areas to find new discoveries.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just spending a lot of money on a specific target, a very small area. So you just go over a wider area and you just screen it. What makes sense structurally, geologically, everything that makes sense, right? And then you kind of shrink down and you get into your greenfield target this way. There are some companies that are doing that, and I'm really excited about that because I believe they're going to find something, right? And there's also a lot of things such as in some areas, you can actually have better access that you did not have, especially in the past. So those areas are totally unexplored areas. And I strongly believe that we're going to have some really brand new discoveries, hopefully this upcoming year.
I would add that I've seen that happen over and over again in past cycles, and the key to that is what you get back to, management teams. And for these kind of thematic plays, you're not looking at actual results on the ground. You're looking at ideas, really smart people, and people who can raise the money to get it happen. So, for those kinds of really big picture plays, the people involved are even more important in your investment considerations.
Yes, I fully agree.
Okay, I just thought about these references to the economic cycles or the bull markets. How do you wrap your head around that when you're looking at the geology, and that obviously is not changing, but people's interest is changing? How do you process that?
Well, I mean, yes, exactly. It's just people's mind that is changing, right? The whole market is pretty much based on how people react to it. So it's just a matter of interest in general. So geology is not changing, but you get more data as the market changes, right? So that's what's going to make a big difference to me. And so people's interest is changing. We're seeing that gold is picking up. Everybody's jumping into gold because they believe that a higher gold price, obviously you're going to have bigger margin in producing company. Then you get into exploration, and there's a lot more investment, a lot more money that comes into exploration. So companies get to drill a lot. They get to produce a lot of work now that they have money, right? And that's when you get to the point where you're actually making money. So I don't know how long that's going to last. And I hope it's going to last, 5 years, hopefully, maybe 2. We don't know. Nobody really knows, but it's kind of like a mass effect coming in right now. And I really like the idea, and it's really how do people think so you can actually make money off what's coming up as well. It's not just a discovery, it's also a matter of mass effect to me.
So basically, yeah, the heightened interest generates more information, so you can actually be a better investor. You can find better prospects. Even though the geology hasn't changed, the information is better.
Exactly. So you get a lot more information by then, and better information, obviously.
Right.
And gold and silver are so much in demand that those are the projects being funded. You're not seeing a lot of high-profile, say, tungsten exploration projects out there getting oversubscribed private placements. But if you're if you've got a good gold or silver target, then the money is there, which is
exactly
so different than the way it was a couple of years ago.
Yeah, especially silver right now. Silver is picking up a lot. And it's very interesting because when you look at the 2004, 2008 crisis, silver was really following gold. In this case, silver is very low comparing to the gold price. So I'm really expecting a lot of silver company to pick up a lot. And I'm really excited about that as well, because one of our projects out of Riverside Resources just got spun out this year, and it's actually a silver and gold project. And this is 𝗀𝗄𝗏 mining. So I definitely look forward to what's going on with that and what's going to happen in the near future, as a lot of companies are being created around that kind of crazy excitement around gold and silver.
And Erika, I know you're on LinkedIn, but are you active at all on social media, or people have to chase you down to try and get your wisdom?
Most of the time, you're going to chase me down.
Yeah.
No, I'm only on LinkedIn, to be honest. I do not do much of social media. I prefer to stay busy with, I have too much going on right now that I don't especially have time with social media, but for sure I'm following a lot of what's going on elsewhere. That's
Okay, well, we appreciate your time sharing it with us, and maybe we can have you on again in future. Thanks so much.
No, thank you very much.
Cheers.
I hope you guys are healthy and have a great bull market as well.
Great to talk with you again, and we're following all of that, the developments of Riverside and Gold Newsletter, of course. So thank you for coming on.
For sure. Thank you very much.